So today's session is going to be on how to frame ceilings and soffits. So give me 1 second. There we go. Okay. So today we're going to cover how to draw ceilings for MWF. So that basically means how to draw them properly and make sure that MWF will frame them. How do you frame ceilings? Basically, we'll cover that. How do you split your ceilings once they're framed? How do you create templates for the ceilings and how to map them? We'll also cover how to draw ceilings as soffits, and then we'll also cover how to frame soffits. So let's get started. So here, I'm gonna, if you're doing a ceiling plan, if you're trying to frame ceilings, you obviously need a ceiling plan or a reflected ceiling plan. So let's first start with how to draw a ceiling for MWF. So here you'll see that I already have a ceiling type drawn, but let's go ahead and figure out the few options we have for drawing ceilings. So let's go to Architecture tab here. I'm just going to go ahead and draw a few walls, and I'm just going to create a nice little box, and I'll have these walls go up to 14 feet. And then I'm also going to draw some walls that are at 12 feet height. Oops, not that way. Maybe just draw one wall going down and another like that. All right. So in order for us to figure out how to draw ceilings, we can go to the Architecture tab and then click on the ceiling option. So in ceilings, we have two options. One is automatic ceiling or a sketch ceiling. So automatic ceiling, basically what that means is if your ceiling height, so say if over here I set it to 13 feet for my ceiling height. Here you'll notice that when I set it to 13 feet, it's selecting the entire box as my room. So the ceiling is going to be applied to the entire box. And the reason for that is when you're doing an automatic ceiling, it's looking for room bounding elements. So basically what that means is if I wanted to have a ceiling in just this little area, since the height of the walls in there is 12 feet, if I set up a 10-foot ceiling, you'll notice that now I can actually place a ceiling in here and I can place another ceiling in here. Why? Because these walls are bounding, so it will actually create a boundary around this area for your ceiling. So basically, if I draw a ceiling at 10-foot height, I'll drop that there, and you'll see that it draws it in that location. But maybe for this entire area, this could be like a warehouse situation where in the warehouse, you might have a ceiling that's actually much higher. And then just for the office areas, you might have a ceiling that's much lower. So your light fixtures and all that fun stuff can be placed inside your ACT or acoustic tile ceiling, and so on and so forth. So maybe you have a condition like this where you have a 13-foot ceiling, which actually covers the entire building, but then you also have your ceiling that is inside the office area. Maybe the 13-foot could be, 18 feet or something like that. But this is just an example. But you can see that when I did the automatic ceiling, since it's at that 13-foot mark, it found that these walls were not existent. So that means it found the next bounding wall condition, which is this edge here. Okay, so sorry, Control Y. So say if you drew this by mistake, like you did an auto ceiling, you maybe set the height wrong and you actually wanted it to just go to here. So maybe I'll set this up to be 11 feet and then I'll go ahead and hit edit boundary and I can just edit the boundary here. So I can select the line command and select where I want it to go and just trim it. This is similar to like floors within Revit as well. So the commands for that are pretty simple. Now, how do I make sure that this will work with MWF? Okay, so first things first, actually, before I get into that, let me just show you one more thing. Let me cut a section here, and let's go to view. Okay, that is section number 3. Let's go ahead and select section number 3. Okay, so over here in section number 3, you can see if I set this define and shade it. Over here, you can see that this ceiling here is lower because we set it to 10 feet, and this ceiling here is at 11 feet. So the height that you're specifying is actually to the bottom part of your gypsum board, or the basically the finish is what you're specifying that value to. So if you need your studs to actually be at 10 feet, then you actually have to consider that thickness. So this additional little layer thickness that you have to consider that, and you have to make sure that, oh, okay, so since it is, since we want the studs, the bottom of the stud to, or the bottom of the joist to be at 10 feet, we are going to actually say subtract this value, and then specify the height offset from level accordingly. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is there's two types of ceilings. Okay, there's a basic ceiling option, and then there's a compound ceiling option. So the basic ceiling option, let's go ahead and select that. So you'll see that it told me that I can't, like, nothing has been selected or the dimension deleted itself. The reason for that is the basic ceiling is honestly like if you've used paint functionality in Revit for walls, it's literally like that. You're just applying a material to the ceiling or to that area. So basically you're drawing a ceiling just to show that this is a fake ceiling. So there's no layers to it. There's no, you can't edit the assembly for it or anything for a basic ceiling. But if you were to go ahead and create a compound ceiling, oops, like we had earlier. So here I've created one which is interior ceiling 5/8 gyp on metal stud, which is what we're going to use for this webinar. So you can see here it actually has a proper thickness, and it actually has a single structural layer. So with everything else, just like everything else in Revit, or sorry, for MWF, for all the other hosts that you create, your walls, your floors, your roofs, you can only have a single layer inside the core boundary, which is what we have here, which is our metal stud layer, which is 3/5/8 inches thick. And the reason for it being 3/5/8 inches is because I'm going to use the 362 studs in there. Or sorry, I keep saying studs, it's actually joists. I'm going to be using 362 S members in there. So that's why it is 3/5/8. And then over here, I also want to add a resilient channel underneath to be able to place those in there. So I created that as my material for that is still metal stud layer, but it is part of my substrate, and I did not add that as part of my core boundary. Okay, and I just guesstimated it's going to be 7/8 of an inch. It might be more, might be less. It's okay. And then over here, I have my finish, which is gypsum wallboard, and you can see that I have specified my thickness for gypsum wallboard. So unlike walls, these values or these thicknesses don't really matter much when it comes to ceilings and floors, and that is because when we go into the templates, I'll show you, but you're specifying the thicknesses yourself. You're not telling it to follow a value here, and the reason for that is our floors and ceilings can be drawn by just drawing marker lines. So you don't even need a ceiling member or a ceiling element in there or a floor element in there. You can just draw marker lines and then create a floor panel out of those marker lines. So that's the reason we don't care about, we don't consider these layers because you can create it multiple ways. But for you to have a really nice and pretty model, architecturally accurate at least, and to ensure that your heights of your joists and everything is correct, I would probably put them in. I like to put them in. So we'll go ahead and hit OK, and I'll hit OK again. And there you go. You'll see that that is your compound ceiling. Okay. I created another one as well, which is for our soffit, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit edit. This is also a compound ceiling. Instead of gypsum board, I could apply like a metal layer to it. So let's say metal aluminum, maybe. And I'm going to call that to be 5/8 as well. You can use honestly whatever thickness you want. If you don't even want aluminum grate or anything in there, you can just get rid of that too. You can just leave it as the structural layer. That's totally fine as well. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. and we'll hit OK again. All right. So those are our ceiling types, and this is how you draw them properly. You'll always have a single layer inside your core boundary. Okay. So the other thing I also wanted to mention is if you don't want to split your panels up using MWF and you want to split it up using Revit, um, feel free to do that because you can actually set up a quick create, or not a quick create, sorry. Let me just switch to the floor module. You can actually template map. It will and quick so you quick create them and we'll use the templates and it will ceilings family will see the templates that's attached and it will apply them. So even if you create multiple little ceilings, you don't have to select each one manually and frame them manually. You can basically select all of that one type and then go ahead and quick create and it will work. So I'll show you that as well. All right, so now that we understand how to draw ceilings, let's go ahead and discuss how to frame them. So once we have our ceiling here, we're gonna go ahead into MWF. We're gonna go ahead into create. So when you're starting a new project, you probably don't have any ceiling templates in there, so you're gonna just use the light gauge template. Since we're using the floor module, the light gauge template for the floor is the same as the ceiling. It doesn't change the families and the sizes in there. So if I frame it with the light gauge and go ahead and say frame it now and create, you will notice that it creates it with 10-inch studs or 10-inch members. So I'm going to go ahead into 3D and show you this really quick. And there you go. So you'll notice that our floor is over here. You see, sorry, our ceiling is over here, compound ceiling, but our members are massive. So you'll see that they're using the 10-inch S250. So that's pretty big, big for a ceiling. So let's go ahead and try to change our properties. So change the properties or create your own template. You can go ahead into the properties of this panel that is now created. And then you can go ahead and specify a panel name or prefix if you like. So for this one, I'm just going to call it ceiling as my alternate name. And then for the position, I like to have for the ceilings, for the member reference position, I like to have it on the center line, and then for the alignment layer as well, I like it on the structural center line. So what that means is the center of the member is aligned to the center of the structural center line. Or, well, center means like aligned to the structural center line, okay? Layer. So you can adjust your elevation similar to floors. If you have a benchmark and you want your studs for your walls to align to the joists of your ceiling or your floor, you can specify the same spacing benchmark and it will follow that spacing benchmark, okay? And then let's go into member properties, and this is where we can set up our tracks and sizes, okay? Since I've already created a template for this, I'm gonna go ahead and select the template, but it's pretty easy. You just double click here, go to family. Instead of this, I'm gonna choose the, actually I'll leave the family the same, but I'll choose the 362T size, and I can choose to use it for both ends, and I can repeat the same steps for all of them. But since I've already set it up, I'll go through the settings, but I'll show it to you with my template. So I will select this template. So if you already have a template, this is how you would select it. And you can hit OK and it will apply that template to your panel. So like I said, your tracks, they're already set up. Over here, if I go into joists, you'll see for both joists, both ends of the joists, it's using 362S. If you want to make any other modifications, feel free to. If you have side tracks, you can see the settings for that as well. And then for your joists, you can set up your settings here as well. So for me, my first joist offset is 1 foot, and my spacing is 2 feet. So if I set this bolt to be 2 feet, then it'll be evenly distributed all along. but I just wanted to show you the little bit of a difference. So you can see that 1 foot offset here, and then the 2 feet, I kept that the same as the default. And then you have extra joists if you wanted to add any additional members, add shear walls or fun things like that. If you wanted to add sheathing, which we kind of do, we want to add our gypsum layer. We don't want to add it to the top of the panel because it's not really a floor. We want to add it to the bottom of the panel. So we'll select bottom of panel and we'll enable sheathing. So in this case, I've already done that. And you'll add 1 layer. The type here is set to default because that's the only size you have for your sheathing, or the sheathing type. Basically, that's the only type you have. If you duplicate it to create one with the gypsum board material and another with the sheathing material or any other material you needed to, you can feel free to do that. For me, I'm just going to leave it as default. Then you can specify the sizes of your sheets. So if you are doing only 4 foot by 8 foot size gyps, you can choose those. If you want it to be according to like your ACT, you can basically set this to be 4 feet by 4 feet or 2 feet by 4 feet as you need. And then the thickness is, like I said, it doesn't read that data from your layers in your ceiling, but you can specify it here. So if you want it to be 5/8 inch thick, for me, that's what I want. So it'll be 5/8 inch thick. Offset from last layer, right now, this functionality is not working for the build or the beta that I have right now. We are in the process of fixing it, but basically here, you will type in the offset you want it to have from your joists, okay? So offset from last layer basically means if you have multiple layers from the previous layer, what do you want it to be? So if you have layer 1, you want layer 1 to be, like I mentioned, it was 7/8 of an inch away to save space for the resilient channel. You can type in 7/8 inch away, and it should be 7/8 inch away from the bottom of the joist or the top of the panel, depending on which functionality you're using. Okay. So for me, this is the value that works properly right now. So that's what I'm going to leave it at. But otherwise, you would have typed in 7/8 over here. If you have any openings, you can specify the tolerances for your sheathing, and your first sheet width is 4 feet. And that's pretty much it. So right now it's alternated. If you don't want it to alternate, you can set it to offset, and that should work too. And you can just make sure the offset is 0 if you want it to be all side by side. I'm going to leave it to alternate. That's how I like it. And then we're going to go ahead and hit OK. I haven't set up anything else here. If you would like to set up belly band, typically for ceilings, you won't need to, but belly band sheathing is basically the sheathing on the side over here to cover your joists. If you need that, feel free to add that in, but for this panel, I don't need it. So once this creates, you will notice that we have our sheathing layer. It's okay if it looks a little off. Like I said, we're still working on that fix. But right now you'll see that we have that sheathing layer added, and it just says default. That's the type name for it. That's why we selected default. And you'll notice that the materials are not applied, like it's not instance parameter for you to modify. You have to actually change it as part of the material properties, or like the edit type, and fix the structural material over here. So if you wanted to create multiple types, like I said, duplicate it, create one for gyp, create one for metal, grates, whatever you like. Okay, so that's basically what it looks like right now. So that little space there is for my resilient channels. So I cannot add my resilient channels as part of my panel because they have to go in the other direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to add that in as bridging. So first things first, let's go ahead and set up our bridging. We'll go to Tools, and then we'll click on Project Bridging Types. So here you'll see that it says RC, and that's basically the one I've set up. But basically the way I set it up is I created new, I gave it a name, and I just chose continuous, and this little section gets updated based on the option you choose here. Okay, so I chose continuous because I need these resilient channels to be continuous throughout the panel, and I don't want them to break at a joist. So, or at every joist, basically. So I'm gonna have this be called RC, and then I'm choosing the family over here. That's light gauge furring hat channels. And then I have selected a type that I would like to use. And then over here, my vertical reference point is basically where do you want the marker line to be placed, or the member to be placed in terms of your joist. So that's the bottom of the joist. The rotation is related to the rotation of your section shape that you're adding. So for me, I'm adding the furry hat channel. So I needed the family, if I put it in at 0, it comes in upside down. So I rotated it 180 over here, and I'm giving it a tag of blocking. So if you select that member, it will say blocking member. Okay. So my bridging type is created now. I'm gonna just select the widget over here. I'm going to go to MWF, and I'm going to go to markers, and I'm going to go ahead and create marker lines. Okay. So once I hit create marker lines, I have the option to choose my spacing, and I have the option to choose my first offset. So I'm gonna set it up like so, and then I'm gonna say RC, and that's the bridging type I have. If I had more, I could select one of those, but this is the only one I have, so I'll select that and just hit OK. So you'll see these lines get created over here, right? So I'm just gonna make sure that none of the edges over here, oh, over here, and over here, and over here have those marker lines. Oh, there it is. That wide lines is our marker line. So I'm just going to get rid of it from the edge there, and the rest is good. So we have those marker lines created, but obviously the member is not showing up yet. So let's go to 3D first and just turn it to the side. And let's go ahead and regenerate this panel. So after you add your marker lines, you can regenerate this panel. So let's give it a second. All right. So now let's go and take a look at it. So you can see over here, it's created that member. And if I go to the section here, you can see that the resilient channel is created. The gypsum board is being placed where I want it to be. And yeah, that's pretty much how you would frame ceiling with a resilient channel and with your gypsum boards dropped in here. Okay. Um, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the questions dialog box. All right, so we covered how to draw ceilings, how to frame them. Let's cover how to split the ceilings. So let's go back to our reflected ceiling plan. So let's say that this ceiling, I wanted to split it halfway over here, and yeah, I wanted to split the ceiling in half, even after I have created the panel. So basically, sorry, give me one second. So basically, in order for me to split it, I'm going to go to MWF, I'm going to go to panel. I'm going to first place a node. So I'm going to place the node on the left line here and then on the right side to make sure. Okay, so I'm going to place one over here and then another over here, and I'm going to hit escape. So after I place the nodes, I can align them. So I can type in AL So maybe this isn't the correct location. I'll just align that one to that location. If I wanted to dimension them, I had the option to do that too. So if I say this panel, this member, I wanted to be over here. I wanted to be at 6 feet exact, for example. So I can do that, and then I can go ahead and hit align to this one, and that will move with it. All right. So after you do that, we can go ahead and do this, click on the widget again, or click on any member of the panel. And then we can go to panel and split panel. Okay. So with them, with PF, it takes a little bit of the same settings for the two panels. So here it says pick first boundary node. So that's the first boundary node, and then the second boundary node. And now we don't want to split it anymore. We'll just hit escape. And you'll notice that you have 1 and 2 widgets added. I'm just going to move them down a little bit like that. And they are added, and there's 2 different panels here. So you'll see there's ceiling panel 6, and then there's ceiling panel 7. Okay? So that's basically what this does. It will split your panels into 2. And you will notice that, you can notice that if I regenerate these 2, that same marker line will be recognized for both panels. So even though we drew that marker line one time, even though since it continues till the end here, it will be considered for this panel as well. So you don't have to redraw it. Okay? So that's basically how you would split your panels. Let's talk about creating templates and mapping them. So um, like I said, we have this template. It looks pretty good. You're going to go into properties. Only thing I want to change in this is maybe the prefix of it. All right, so let's go into name and give it an alternate name. I'll give it an alternate name of ceiling. And then I'll go into template. And then I'll select the interior ceiling template, and I'm going to update it. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit update. All right, so when you hit update, we can again go ahead and select this one and make sure that the one, all the updates we've given it or added to it, it's saved. Let's go ahead and hit OK. All right. And basically, you can see that it says ceiling here, and it updated my template according to my settings. So everything looks good. So now what I want to do is I want to set up a template map because I have that same ceiling being used over here. So in the ceiling plan, if you can't select your ceiling, make sure this select elements by face is editable. So if it does not have the, whoops, sorry. It basically, if it has the X, then you'll notice that I can't select the ceiling unless I do a fence like that, and then it will let me select the ceiling. But if I do have it editable, I can just select the face and it will let me select the ceiling. So all of these are the exact same ceiling here. So all 1, 2, 3, 4 are the same. So let's set up a template map in order for our panels to be able to use that. So let's go ahead and create a new one. We'll call it MWF and click on it. Here you can choose a category. So since the same module can be used for floor, ceilings, and roofs, I'm just going to choose the ceiling category. But if you have all 3 selected, you'll see them like this. Okay. I'm just going to stick to the ceiling category and go ahead and say add. So I'm going to add a template map. Our ceiling name is interior ceiling, and we want to use the interior ceiling template. So here you can see interior ceiling template, and basically going to, there. Okay. So I'm going to use the interior ceiling template, and I want to lock to template. So I'm going to go ahead and lock to template here. And then over here, I'm going to go ahead and check on frame it now. So if there's multiples of this, if there's multiples of these being created, it will frame it at the same time instead of you going back and regenerating it after the fact. Okay. So once you finish that, you can go ahead and hit OK. And you can select the ceilings you want to frame. And we can go ahead and quick create this. So this feature is available in 8444. I believe it's one of our newer features. So you can select multiples and go ahead and quick create them for floor panels. All right, so let's go ahead and wait for this to complete. And once we finish this, we can go ahead and add in our marker lines and continue those marker lines all the way to the end so that it will automatically do this. Okay. All right. So if you want, I can add the marker lines, but basically you'll add the marker lines by going to markers, create marker lines, and then let it. Sorry, guys. My computer's a little slow today. All right, so we'll just go ahead and hit OK because it remembers those settings. You will notice that these lines are ending right at this edge of the ceiling. If you wanted to extend it, you can feel free to extend it down and associate those lines, just extend those down and then regenerate the panel, and all those members will be created for the panels that are regenerated. Okay, so that's basically how it will work with the marker lines. Now let's go ahead and talk about our soffits. So we already created the template. I showed you how to update it and maybe how to map it. So let's go ahead and draw our soffits. So I'm going to go to our roof plan. Ignore these little edges because that was my roof framing voids, basically. So let me just go VV here and hide generic models. And I also want to hide, actually I want to make roofs transparent. Okay, I want to hide structural framing just so that I don't see, oh, it's already hit, perfect. There, okay. So here you can see that I have the walls down there, and then I also have my edges of my roof. So I want to create a soffit under here. Typically, architecturally, if you wanted to create a soffit, you would just go to the roof and say soffit, and then you'll draw out the sketch of your soffit. And you can also choose something like this option, which picks the roof's edges. So that line is already drawn for you, and then you just select the walls and basically draw those lines for yourself as well. But when it comes to framing them, you actually want to frame them as individual pieces, right? Because this might take precedence. Maybe over this one, you won't have a diagonal here. You might have it as a solid cut. So this might go all the way through, and then there'll be another piece being placed here. So you'll have multiple panels most probably because you want the members to go in the shorter direction, right? So you want the span to be in the shorter direction and the shorter direction. Whereas if you treat that all as one panel, you will have all the members facing the same way, or the span will be in the same direction. So in order for us to fix this, so instead of drawing it as a soffit, are you sure you want to? Yes, I want to discard the roof soffit. If you've already drawn the soffit, you can copy that sketch and paste it inside your ceiling sketch. and that should allow you to do pretty much the same thing. But here, we're going to go ahead and do sketch ceiling. This model is a little simple, so I can literally just draw a box. But like I said, I might want the shorter face or a shorter length to take precedence. So it has a little more support at the edge versus the longer face. So maybe I will just align that, that to here. Okay, and then I'll check box. So you'll see that it created the roof, or sorry, created a ceiling, but it created it at 0 feet from the roof level. So in order for us to see this, maybe we should go to 3D. Okay, and let's see if we can see that little ceiling we drew. There you go. So we have that little ceiling drawn over there. So now we want to make sure that we can mirror it over to the other side. So again, I'll go to the roof view. I can probably turn on, sorry, I can probably create a ceiling view for the roof as well so that I can see everything properly. So let's go to plan, create a reflected ceiling plan for the roof. Okay. And ignore those little pieces. Again, like I said, those are the rafters I've drawn for the roof. And I'm going to, where is this? Okay. So I'm going to have it, actually, let me see from level 2. That might be easier. There. Yeah. Let's set this to roof and look up. No, no showing me the ceiling. Okay, great. It's all right. So basically what I wanted to do is take that ceiling and mirror it to this side. Oh, there it is. So, and mirror it to this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the ceiling that I've drawn, this one, and then I'm going to go ahead and just mirror it the other side using the center of the, okay, let's just use this path. Okay, and then you can adjust it as you need, obviously. So you're just going to draw your ceilings or your soffits where you need them to be and the length you need them to be. So I'm just going to draw these two right now. And let's go ahead and figure out the framing for the soffit. So I'm going to go back to my level 1. Since I have that ceiling drawn as a soffit, just go back here, make sure that one is also drawn as a soffit. So I have a different family for this. And basically the difference between this family and the other one is um, there's no resilient channel layer in here. So that's the only difference. So I'm just going to go to level 1 and draw my template soffit. So again, I'm going to go to architecture, ceiling, sketch a ceiling, and we are going to draw a box. Okay. And we'll go ahead and hit OK. And for this one, we're going to switch it to the soffit. And now we're going to try to create the framing for this. So you can go ahead and hit create. And I have a soffit template here, but I'm actually much more happier with the interior ceiling template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the interior ceiling template as a base and go ahead and hit create. Okay, and once I finish creating this, again, I'm going to go to 3D, and this is not supposed to be called a ceiling. I want this template, I want this template to be called a soffit. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to properties and make that soffit, and make sure we get rid of that 7/8 or gap that we had left because we don't have the resilient channel layer anymore. So let's go ahead and change this to SOFFIT. For the members, I want them all to be the same except for the sheathing. I want it to not have this value. I want it to be 0. And I wanted to go ahead and say OK and hit OK. All right, so you can see now, if I go to this side, you can see that I have my gypsum board. Again, like I said, it's default because I didn't create two different types for it. But if I did, then it would have been a metal layer and the other one would have been a gypboard layer. But that's basically it. Nothing else changed in the template except for that gap and the name. So you can see that it's called Soffits. So your schedules will be a little more organized in this case. All right. So now that I have that template, let's go. Oh, sorry. Let's map. Let's save the template first, and then we can map it. Do. Actually, let's do the mapping because I already have the template name created. So let's go ahead and hit add. We're gonna go ahead and map it to the soffit metal stud with metal siding. And then here I'm gonna apply the LGS soffit template to it and lock it and frame it. So the reason I like my test panels to be outside my building and not a part of the building at all is because if I use the quick create and I lock it to the template, I know that it's going to whenever I regenerate, it's going to always try to match whatever the template is set to. So if the template in the template we added an additional stud, it's going to add that additional stud for all the panels that have that extra member, or sorry, have that template applied. So, or if I've added connectors, I want it to happen to the entire project after I regenerate those panels. So when I'm setting it up as a panel or setting it up as a template, that has not been quick created and that has not been set to be locked to the template. So the easiest way is to delete it and recreate or like quick create that panel if you're using some panel inside your building as your base or your test. But I typically like to have a sandbox section on the side of the model where I have all my walls drawn out and I can test out all my quick creates and all my templates and fix all my templates in that section. Okay, so I have this written as Soffit and all that fun stuff. I'm going to go to the template, click on Soffit, and I'm going to hit update. And you can just go ahead and select it to make sure all your settings have saved and hit OK. So now you know that your settings have saved, there's no gap, and that says Soffit. So again, I can just go ahead I'm going to go into my level 2 so I can see that little roof section or ceiling section there and that little ceiling section there. And I can go ahead and quick create it as my soffit. So after this gets done, that's pretty much it for this webinar. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the questions dialogue within the dashboard. Bishop, do you see any questions on your end?
I believe I do. I see a question from Chad Christensen. So let me just quickly pull that up.
Okay.
The question goes, does MWF have the capability to use GridX families instead of studs?
So the families you use, you can use any families you like, but for the grid families, just make sure that if you want the T grids to be added in, you can use the T grid profile for sure, like how we use the hot channel profile. You can use the T grid profile as your joists as well, but just make sure that if you need those if you need the string for the grid to show up for your coordination and things like that, make sure you have a repeating profile or a detail line or model line that places that little line, because with this, you can place a continuous member. It doesn't break that member into mini pieces. So if you have a continuous T grid, great, it will work perfectly, but it doesn't create that cross for you. So it doesn't create the grid in the other direction. You'll have to add the other direction as bridging because you cannot have two you cannot have two panels within the floor, unlike with walls. With walls, you can have multiple panels inside the same wall. With floors, you cannot do that. So you will have to draw one T grid one T grid in one direction, and then the other one will have to be a bridging going the other direction. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Okay, perfect.
And we'll just open the
All right.
floor
Are
for
there?
many questions. Sorry, if I can go ahead if you want.
No, that's fine. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm going to just show you this little section in 3D so we can see what that looks like. Yeah, okay. So like I mentioned, if you ever feel like you need these to be in the shorter direction, so what you would actually have to do is in this case, you can select the little member here and just rotate it by 90 degrees and then regenerate the panel, and it will show it to you in the shorter direction. So you'll see the joist being placed in the shorter direction. Sorry, give it 1 second. And I'll just quickly show that to you in 3D again. Sorry, let me just select that and go to 3D. There. So you can see that now it's created the joists in that location all the way down. If you wanted it to, if you say if you had maximum panel lengths, I would recommend creating those nodes the way we did over here, place nodes, and just place the nodes every 16 feet, like have them spaced out at 16 feet or 15 feet, depending on your maximums. And then whatever the end condition is, let it be the end condition, and then go ahead and split your panels and select those nodes. That way your panel will be split and you'll still meet your maximums. All right. Okay, that's it for this week's webinar.